The United States Senate will be decided by just a handful of states. Hello everybody, welcome to Politics Enhanced, and thank you all for clicking on today's video. Today we're going to do our second to last Senate election prediction, and we're going to talk about the states and how each candidate running for the Senate stands in each state. But before I begin, I kindly ask that you please like, comment, and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss another video, and let's try to get to 1,000 subscribers by election day. But without further ado, we're going to start with the safe Republican states, the states that will be voting for the Republican Senate candidate no matter what. You've got Wyoming, Utah, Missouri, the Deep South, Florida. I know this is going to be controversial to some people, but Florida Republicans are just killing it. Indiana and West Virginia. That was Joe Manchin's Senate seat. However, he decided to drop out, and now West Virginia has just moved very far away from the Democrats, and you probably won't see another statewide Democrat official for a very long time in the state of West Virginia. Now, we're going to talk about the safe Democrat states, the states that will be voting for the Democrat candidate no matter what. You've got the West Coast, you have the Eastern Seaboard, you have New York, and you have Hawaii. And you also have Maine at large voting for the Democrat candidate no matter what. And now we're really left with the true battleground states, or the states that you could say will be won by under 10 points. So we're going to start with the likely Republican states. And I really want to talk about the state of Texas, because Texas is a state a lot of people have been talking about, and they've been saying, people on Twitter, and as some people may say, the election mafia, have been talking about how Texas is going to go blue, it's the next swing state. No, it's not. It is not the next swing state. Yes, you had a few really poorly conducted polls that showed Ted Cruz within 3 points of losing. And a lot of people point to 2018 and say, oh, that was a 2-point race. Guys, Texas is not going blue. The reason why I say that is, first of all, 2018 was a blue wave year. So a lot of states were closer than they should have been. Additionally, in 2024, you have Trump at the top of the ticket. Now, I know that might not mean a lot, but that will help him down ballot in a couple of states. Not entirely, but to some extent it will help him win the Congress and the Senate. So with Texas, I do believe it will be likely Republican. I say Cruz probably wins Texas by about 5 points, 5 to 7 points, somewhere in that range. And it's not going blue anytime soon. The Hispanics in the state of Texas have shifted vastly to the right. You do have the urban areas that will vote heavily Democrat, but they're checked by the rural part of Texas, the western part of the state that's heavily and reliably Republican. Now, I would like to talk about the likely Democrat states, which there are going to be a few, and I think we're going to move east to west in this situation. So with regards to the likely Democrat states, we're going to start with the state of Virginia. Now, I know Virginia is going to be close this presidential election, and Donald Trump is really trying to win the state of Virginia as a whole. However, I don't see a path forward for Hung Cao to win in Virginia, because as of right now, he is down by about 8% in the polling aggregate against his opponent, Tim Kaine, who is a longtime Democrat senator, and it is very difficult to unseat someone who's been in the Senate for a long time. So it is possible, but I would say it's very unlikely. And even though Hung Cao is a great Republican candidate, he's very good on the issues. He knows how to appeal to the establishmentarian people and the various groups in Virginia as a whole, but I just don't see how he could win the Senate election. The presidential race is going to be much closer than the Senate election, but you do have split ticket voting in the state of Virginia, so you could have people vote for Trump at the top of the ticket and then vote Democrat or for other party candidates down ballot. So Virginia, I say, will be won by Tim Kaine, probably by about 6 to 8%, and it'll be a likely Democrat state with regards to the Senate. The next likely state that I would like to talk about is going to be the state of Minnesota, because with Amy Klobuchar at the top of the ticket, again, Minnesota is one of those states that is very hard to predict. We don't know the margin of victory, but you do have Amy Klobuchar. She is popular in the state of Minnesota. It's going to be hard to unseat her, and I think she'll probably win it by about 8%, maybe even more. Could be a safe state. And next, we're going to talk about the state of New Mexico, which also will be a likely Democrat state. You have a lot of suburban white voters who tend to be more liberal in the state of New Mexico for some reason. Even though they were part of Bush's coalition in the 2000s, they have drifted away from the Republican Party, and this was long before Trump. Trump, I think, only sped up that away from the GOP. But New Mexico will probably be won by the Democrats, probably by about, I'd say, 8 to 10 points. It might even be safe. I'm not sure, but I'm going to put it as likely because I do think we're going to have a red wave this year. And that's it for the likely Democrat states. Now, I think we need to talk about the lean states, the states that will be going lean in this election. And we're going to move east to west. So I think the first lean state is going to be the state of Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, I think Bob Casey is going to win Pennsylvania. And the reason why I say this is, if you look at 2022, we see that that Republicans were heavily overestimated. Democrats were very underestimated in the state of Pennsylvania, and Fetterman almost won by about 5%. And when you look at the polling aggregate, a lot of people were confused in 2022 because Oz had the lead back at the very end of the election. However, what people didn't take into consideration is that early voting actually began way back in September. And as you can see, the polling, if you go back to, late September, it shows Fetterman up by 4.7%. What this means is that if we look at what he actually won by, which is 4.9%, we can say that the early voting or the polling at this time in the election is probably the most accurate a month out before the general election, because that's when early voting starts. So if we look at 2024 in the state of Pennsylvania, we see Bob Casey leading by 4.4%. And I'm not saying that's exactly going to be his margin of victory. I do think it will be closer because it is an election year, but I still see Casey winning probably anywhere from 3 to 4%, and it will be a lean state for the Democrats. Next, I'd also like to talk about the state of Wisconsin, because Wisconsin is a tough state to poll. However, it's very hard to unseat a incumbent senator. You do have Tammy Baldwin, who's been there for a while, and I just don't see a path for the Republicans to unseat her, unless if there was some major scandal, but usually incumbents are very hard to unseat, and I think it's going to go down the wire regardless in this election. But in the Senate, specifically in the state of Wisconsin, I see Baldwin winning anywhere from 2.5% to 4.5%. I think that's it for the lean Democrat states, and now I would like to talk about the lean Republican states. And as we can see, Republicans have already taken back the Senate. They already have 50 seats. So if Trump wins, J.D. Vance would be the tie-breaking vote for the Senate. But we really want a rhino-proof majority, and it would be so much better if the Republicans had more than 50 seats. So looking at the map, we have Michigan, we have Ohio, Montana, Nevada, and Arizona. And realistically, these should be Republican-friendly states, and I do believe that some of them are. But unfortunately, however, there are some problems that we need to discuss. So first of all, we're going to talk about the state of Montana, because I do believe that will be lean Republican. I don't know why Montana is so close. You do have a lot of people moving from the state of California and the Pacific Northwest, and that is hurting Republicans in the state of Montana. However, you do have President Trump at the top of the ticket, and I think that will ultimately help them in the Senate. So I see Montana going lean Republican. I would really be surprised if the Democrats won in Montana, but I just don't see that happening. And even though Jon Tester is an incumbent Democrat, he's not really popular. Montana is becoming more of a populist state, even though it is trending to the left. The conservatives in that state have become more populist, so I don't see Jon Tester holding on to another Senate term. And that leaves us with the last 4 battleground states, the states that will be very close and narrow for either candidate. But as you can see, Republicans have in fact taken back the Senate, and historically speaking, whichever party takes over the Senate in an election year usually also wins the White House. And this has been true since the year 2000. I'll probably make a video on that coming up soon, but that is something to consider, because as of right now, the Republicans coming out the gate are going to have 51 Senate seats, and we're going to see how big that margin of victory will be for the Republicans. So again, I'd like to move east to west, and we'll end off with Nevada and Arizona. So we're going to start with Ohio, because a lot of people are talking about how Ohio is, moving to the left, and Sherrod Brown is going to win. And if you look at the polls now, we see that Brown only has a 3.5% lead, which isn't necessarily good, but the fact that he's under 50% gives the Republicans and Moreno a lot of hope in the state of Ohio. And the reason I say that is Ohio is a Rust Belt state, and we know that the Rust Belt is very hard to poll. For whatever reason, it's a hard state to poll, and it's hard to get numbers out of the state of Ohio. And if you don't believe me, look at 2022, right? So J.D. Vance won by 6.5%. He was supposed to win by 8, but if you look back in September, which is when the early voting began, as we can see, he was only up by 1%, and then his lead grew towards the very end. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be a landslide for the Republicans or Moreno in the state of Ohio. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is I wouldn't necessarily rule him out, and ultimately, it's going to be close. Sherrod Brown is an incumbent, but the only reason why he's held on for so long is because 2018 was a blue wave year, 2012 was also a blue wave year. So all in all, I do believe that this state will flip for the Republicans, and Moreno will barely win in the state of Ohio. He'll probably win by about less than 1%. It will be a close race because he's unseating an incumbent senator, and that really is unusual. Doesn't happen too often. So Ohio, will be tilt Republican for Moreno. Michigan, the great state of Michigan, is our next state on the list, and you don't have an incumbent senator, so really it's anybody's game in the state of Michigan. However, the Republicans in Michigan are really incompetent as of now. They don't have good leadership, and I do see Slotkin pulling off the state of Michigan probably by 2%. Roughly, it will be a close state. I do think that Donald Trump will win the state of Michigan. I do predict that. But in terms of Slotkin, she's probably favored to win just because the Republicans don't have the best leadership as of right now. And finally, we're left with the last two states, Nevada and Arizona. And these two states could very well decide the Senate if Republicans, let's say, lose Ohio. It's all going to come down to Arizona and Nevada. And we're going to start with Arizona because, honestly, I think Kari Lake is really running a crappy campaign. She's a great candidate. She is well-spoken, but she's not running the best campaign as of right now. And as we can see, Gallego is up by almost 6 points. And it's solely because Kari Lake flip-flops. She goes back and forth. And I think if she had more money and if she would be more consistent with what she said, with her policy stances, I do believe she very well could win the Senate election. But we're coming up to early voting, I think, has already begun in Arizona. I mean, we're running out of time here. So I think Gallego is going to win in Arizona. And I've said this before. I've always said this. If you had the sheriff, Mark Lamb, if you had him, I think, yes, they probably would have won this time around. But because Kari Lake just isn't running a good campaign, I think Gallego's going to win probably by about 3%, a lean margin. Could be tilt as well if it's a really good night, but I just don't see Arizona giving us a Republican senator, unfortunately. And finally, that leaves us with the state of Nevada. And Nevada has been trending to the right, and it's been a bit of a white whale for Republicans. You do see in 2022 that Laxalt almost won, barely lost because of a snowstorm in the Reno area. That cost him the election by 7,000 votes, roughly. If you look at 2024, we see that Rosen is up almost 9% over Sam Brown. And honestly, I don't see Nevada being likely Democrat. I think they're really overestimating the Democrats in the state of Nevada. And I think this really is a pure toss-up because Trump is doing very good with the voters in the state of Nevada. You had the purging of non-active voters and people who moved out of the state, which is important to make sure that our elections are secure. But all in all, I think this is probably the closest state this election cycle. And it really is a pure toss-up, but I'm going to be bold and I'm going to say that Sam Brown is barely going to win the state of Nevada and the Senate election. It's going to be within a few hundred votes, less than 0.5%. Very, very close. That is my second to last Senate prediction. I predict the Republicans will have 53 seats to the Democrats 47, but this is only possible if we get out and vote. Make sure your voice is heard, and let's get that Republican Senate majority so when Trump wins, he can get his work done. Thank you all for watching this video. Again, please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell if you haven't already, and until next time, Politics Enhanced out.